I thought buying a house in Scottsdale, Arizona, would be the best decision of my life. But I never imagined it would turn into a legal nightmare that would cost my HOA $30,000 and their board president her position. My name is Yosef Richardson, and this is the story of how I fought back against the most vindictive homeowners association I could have ever encountered. It started on a Tuesday morning in late March when I found a certified letter taped to my front door. I had just gotten back from my morning run, still sweating in the Arizona heat, even though it was barely 7 in the morning. The envelope had the official HOA letterhead, and I felt my stomach drop before I even opened it. Nothing good ever came from these people. Inside was a notice of intent to file a lien against my property for unpaid HOA dues totaling $2,300. I read it 3 times, convinced I was missing something. According to the letter, signed by someone named Brenda Morrison, the HOA board president, I had failed to pay my quarterly assessments for the past 9 months. The letter went on to say that if I did not pay the full amount plus an additional $500 in late fees within 30 days, they would place a lien on my home and potentially begin foreclosure proceedings. I stood in my entryway, dripping sweat onto the tile floor, completely confused. I had lived in Desert Bloom Heights for exactly 18 months, and I had never missed a single HOA payment. I was meticulous about my finances. Every 3 months, like clockwork, I wrote a check for the $255 assessment and dropped it in the payment drop box at the community center. I even had copies of every cleared check in my filing cabinet. The first thing I did was march straight to my home office and pull out my HOA payment file. There they were, 6 cleared checks, each one made out to Desert Bloom Heights HOA, each one stamped with a date received by my bank, each one showing the HOA had cashed them. The most recent one was from January 15th, just 2 months ago. I made copies of everything and decided I would visit the HOA office that afternoon to clear up what was obviously a clerical error. The Desert Bloom Heights Community Center sat at the entrance to our neighborhood, a stucco building painted in that beige color that seemed to dominate every structure in Scottsdale. I walked in at 3 in the afternoon, armed with my folder of documentation, ready to sort this out like a reasonable adult. The receptionist, a young woman named Emily who I had spoken with a few times before, looked up nervously when I entered. "Hi, Yosef. Are you here to see someone?" "I need to speak with whoever handles the payment records," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I received a letter this morning about unpaid dues, but I have proof that I have paid everything on time." Emily's face flushed. Let me get Mrs. Morrison for you." She disappeared into the back office, and I heard hushed voices. A few minutes later, a woman emerged who I recognized from neighborhood events. Brenda Morrison was in her early 50s, with blonde hair cut in a severe bob and a permanent expression that suggested she had just smelled something unpleasant. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit and carried herself with the kind of self-importance that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Mr. Richardson," she said, not offering to shake my hand. "What can I do for you?" "I received this letter today," I said, holding up the notice. "It says I owe over $2,000 in unpaid dues, but I have never missed a payment. I have copies of all my cleared checks right here." I opened my folder and started to lay out the copies on the reception desk. Brenda glanced at them for maybe 2 seconds before pushing them back toward me. "Our records show you have not paid," she said flatly. "If you believe you have paid, you will need to provide proof to our accounting department. They will review your claim and make a determination." "I am providing proof," I said, pointing to the checks. "These are all cleared checks. Your organization cashed them." You can see the dates and amounts right here. Mr. Richardson, I do not have time to stand here and debate accounting with you, Brenda said, crossing her arms. If you want to dispute the charges, you need to submit a formal written appeal within 14 days. The process is outlined in the CC&R documents you received when you purchased your home. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a board meeting to prepare for. She turned on her heel and walked back into the office, leaving me standing there with Emily looking at me apologetically. I gathered my papers, my face burning with frustration, and left the building. This was not going to be as simple as I had hoped. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and drafted a formal letter of dispute. I attached copies of all 6 cleared checks, along with my bank statements showing the withdrawals. I detailed the date of each payment, the amount, and the check number. I hand-delivered it to the community center the next morning, making sure to get a time-stamped receipt from Emily. 2 weeks went by with no response. I called the HOA office 3 times, leaving messages each time. Emily always sounded uncomfortable when she answered, telling me that Mrs. Morrison was reviewing my case and would get back to me soon. On the 16th day, I received another letter, this one even more threatening than the first. According to this new letter, my dispute had been reviewed and denied. The HOA board had determined that their records were accurate, and that I did, in fact, owe $2,300 plus late fees, which had now increased to $750 due to the additional time that had passed. Furthermore, the letter stated that because I had submitted a frivolous dispute, they were adding a $200 administrative processing fee to my account. My total alleged debt was now $3,250. The letter went on to say that if I did not pay within 10 days, they would file a lien against my property. It also mentioned that the lien would be recorded with the Maricopa County Recorder's Office and would appear on my title, potentially affecting my credit and my ability to sell or refinance my home. I sat there reading and rereading the letter, my hands shaking with anger. This was not just incompetence anymore. This felt deliberate. I had provided clear, irrefutable evidence that I had paid my dues, and they had simply dismissed it without explanation. The addition of fees for submitting a frivolous dispute was particularly galling since my dispute was backed by actual bank records. I decided it was time to consult with an attorney. I had a friend from college, Marcus Chen, who practiced real estate law in Phoenix. I called him that afternoon and explained the situation. He listened quietly, asking a few clarifying questions, and then let out a long sigh. "Yosef, this sounds like a case of slander of title," Marcus said. "If they file a lien against your property when they know or should know that you do not actually owe this debt, they are essentially making a false claim that clouds your title. That is actionable. You could sue them for damages." "What kind of damages are we talking about?" I asked. "Well, you would be entitled to your actual damages, which could include any costs you incur defending against the lien, any impact on your ability to sell or refinance, and your attorney's fees. In some cases, you might also be entitled to punitive damages if you can show that their actions were malicious or in bad faith. But let me be clear, litigation is expensive and time-consuming. My advice would be to try one more time to resolve this directly with them, maybe with an attorney's letter to show you are serious. If they still refuse to back down, then we can talk about filing suit." "I want to send that letter," I said immediately. "I have been more than reasonable. I have provided documentation. They are ignoring facts and threatening to damage my property title. I want them to know I am not going to roll over for this." "All right," Marcus said. I will draft a demand letter for you. It will lay out the facts, include copies of your payment records, explain the legal concept of slander of title, and demand that they immediately withdraw their claim and provide written confirmation that you owe nothing. I will also give them a deadline to respond, typically 10 days. We will see how they react. 3 days later, Marcus emailed me a draft of the demand letter. It was 6 pages long, written in formal legal language that made my case sound even more ironclad than I had thought. He detailed each payment, cited Arizona statutes regarding HOA collections and slander of title, and made it clear that if the HOA proceeded with filing a lien, I would pursue legal action seeking compensatory and punitive damages, as well as attorney's fees. The letter concluded with a demand that the HOA retract all claims against me within 10 business days and provide a written apology for the error. I approved the letter, and Marcus sent it via certified mail to Brenda Morrison and the entire HOA board of directors. The return receipt showed that someone at the HOA office signed for it on a Thursday afternoon. Then I waited. The 10-day deadline came and went with no response. I checked my mailbox obsessively, hoping for some communication, but there was nothing. On the 12th day, I called Marcus. "They are not going to respond," I told him. "What do we do now?" "We wait a little longer," Marcus said. "Sometimes these things take time to work through their bureaucracy. Give it another week, and if we still hear nothing, we will need to decide whether you want to move forward with litigation." On day 15, I got my answer, but not in the way I expected. I was at work, sitting in my office at the software company where I worked as a project manager, when my phone rang. It was the title company that had handled my home purchase 18 months earlier. "Mr. Richardson, this is Janet Nguyen from Sunset Title," the woman on the phone said. "I am calling because we have been notified that a lien has been filed against your property at 4782 Desert Willow Court. The lien is from your homeowners association for unpaid dues. I wanted to reach out because we have your contact information on file and thought you should know." My stomach dropped. They actually filed it. When? "According to the Maricopa County records, it was filed yesterday," Janet said. "The amount listed is $3,250. Is this something you were aware of?" "I am aware that they have been claiming I owe money, but I do not actually owe anything," I said, my voice tight. "I have proof of payment for all my dues. This is a false lien." "Oh dear," Janet said. "Well, you will definitely want to take action to have it removed as quickly as possible. A lien like this can affect your credit and your ability to use your property as collateral. I would recommend speaking with an attorney." I thanked her for the call and immediately dialed Marcus. He answered on the second ring, and I could barely keep my voice level as I explained what had happened. "They filed the lien," I said. "Even after your letter, even after I provided documentation, they went ahead and filed it anyway." "Okay," Marcus said, and I could hear him typing on his keyboard. "Let me pull up the county records. Hold on." There was a pause, more typing, and then a low whistle. "Yeah, I see it. Filed yesterday, $3,250. This is exactly what we warned them about." "Yosef, at this point, I think you have grounds for a very strong lawsuit. They received a letter from an attorney laying out clear evidence that you do not owe this debt, and they proceeded anyway. That shows either gross negligence or actual malice, both of which are bad for them." "So what do? "We file suit," Marcus said. "We sue them for slander of title, and we ask for removal of the lien, compensatory damages for any harm this causes you, punitive damages for their willful disregard of the facts, and attorney's fees. I am going to need a retainer from you to get started, but I am confident we can win this case. The evidence is on our side. We spent the next hour on the phone discussing the details. Marcus quoted me a retainer fee of $5,000, which made me wince, but he assured me that we would seek to recover all attorney's fees from the HOA if we won. I agreed, and we scheduled a meeting for the following day to begin preparing the complaint. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus and I worked together to build the case. He requested additional documentation from me, including all correspondence with the HOA, my HOA governing documents, and any other relevant records. He also did some research into the HOA board members and discovered some interesting facts. Brenda Morrison had been the board president for 4 years and had a reputation in the community for being difficult and vindictive. Marcus found records of 2 other lawsuits filed against the HOA during her tenure, both settled quietly out of court. He also discovered that the HOA's management company had changed 3 times in the past 4 years, which suggested ongoing problems with governance. "This paints a picture," Marcus said during one of our meetings at his office in downtown Phoenix. "This is not just an isolated mistake. There is a pattern of poor management and aggressive collection tactics that is going to help us when we argue for punitive damages." The complaint was filed in Maricopa County Superior Court on a Monday morning in early May. It named the Desert Bloom Heights HOA as the defendant and asserted claims for slander of title, violation of Arizona HOA statutes, and negligent infliction of emotional distress. We requested removal of the lien, compensatory damages, punitive damages, and attorney's fees. Marcus filed it electronically, and I received a copy via email within minutes. "Now we wait for them to respond," Marcus said. "They have 20 days to file an answer to the complaint. My guess is they will hire an attorney, and that attorney will take one look at your bank records and advise them to settle immediately. But we will see." The HOA was served with the complaint 3 days later. I knew because Emily called me that afternoon, her voice trembling. "Yosef, I just wanted to say I am really sorry about all of this," she said quietly. "I tried to tell Mrs. Morrison that your payments were in our records, but she would not listen. She insisted that our system was right and that you were trying to scam the HOA. I do not think any of this is fair." "Wait, what do you mean my payments were in your records?" I asked, my heart racing. "I should not be telling you this," Emily said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But when you first came in with those check copies, I went into our accounting software and I could see all your payments. They were all there, properly recorded and deposited. But when I showed Mrs. Morrison, she told me the system must be wrong and that she had a separate spreadsheet showing you had not paid. She used her spreadsheet instead of the actual accounting software. I do not know why." I felt a cold fury settle over me. "Emily, would you be willing to testify to that if needed?" There was a long pause. "I do not want to lose my job." "I understand," I said, "but what she did was not just wrong, it was potentially illegal. She filed a false lien against my property knowing that I had paid. That is fraud." "I know," Emily said, and I could hear her crying softly. "I already gave my notice. I cannot work for someone like that. My last day is next Friday. If you need me to testify after that, I will do it. I have copies of some things that I think you will want to see." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Scottsdale that Saturday. When I arrived, Emily was already there, sitting at a corner table with a manila folder in front of her. She looked nervous, glancing around as if worried someone might see us. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, sitting down across from her. "I brought you copies of everything I could find," Emily said, sliding the folder across the table. "There are printouts from our accounting software, showing all your payments. There is also an email chain between Mrs. Morrison and the board treasurer, where she tells him to disregard the accounting software and use her spreadsheet instead. And there is another email where the treasurer questions why your account is showing as delinquent when the software shows you paid, and she tells him to mind his own business and follow her instructions. I opened the folder and started reading. The evidence was even more damning than I had hoped. The emails showed clearly that Brenda Morrison knew I had paid my dues, but had deliberately chosen to report me as delinquent anyway. In one email, dated just 2 days before she sent me the first demand letter, the treasurer, a man named Robert Palmer, wrote, "Brenda, I am uncomfortable reporting Yosef Richardson as delinquent. Our software clearly shows he has paid every quarter on time. Can you explain the discrepancy?" Her response was chilling in its brevity. "Robert, I am the board president and I am telling you he is delinquent. That is all the explanation you need. Update your records accordingly." "This is incredible," I said, looking up at Emily. "She knew I had paid and she went after me anyway." "Why would she do that?" Emily bit her lip. "I think I know, but it is just speculation. About a year ago, before you even moved in, you applied to the architectural committee to install solar panels on your roof, right?" "Yes," I said, remembering the frustrating process. "It took them 6 months to approve it, and they made me jump through all kinds of hoops." "Mrs. Morrison voted against your application," Emily said. "She thought solar panels were ugly and would bring down property values. But the rest of the committee outvoted her, and your application was approved. I heard her complaining about it in the office, saying that owners like you who wanted to change the neighborhood should not be allowed to live here. I think she has had it out for you ever since." I sat back in my chair, stunned. This entire nightmare was because of a personal vendetta over solar panels. It was so petty, so vindictive that I almost could not believe it, but the evidence in front of me told the story clearly. "Emily, can I give this to my attorney?" I asked. "That is why I brought it," she said. "Someone needs to stop her. She has done this kind of thing before to other people, but no one has ever fought back. They just pay whatever she demands because they are scared. But you have proof, and you have the resources to take her on. Please make sure she cannot do this to anyone else." I made copies of everything and gave the folder to Marcus the next day. His eyes widened as he read through the documents. "This changes everything," he said. "This is not just slander of title anymore. This is fraud. This is intentional infliction of emotional distress. This is potentially even extortion. Yosef, with this evidence, we are not just going to win, we are going to bury them." Marcus immediately filed an amended complaint, adding additional claims and attaching the emails as exhibits. He also sent a copy to the other members of the HOA board, along with a letter suggesting that they might want to consider removing Brenda Morrison from her position before things got worse. The response came faster than I expected. 5 days after Marcus sent the amended complaint and the letter, I received a call from a man who identified himself as Gerald Hoffman, the vice president of the HOA board. "Mr. Richardson, I want to apologize on behalf of the board for what has happened," Gerald said. He sounded tired and embarrassed. "Several of us had no idea what Mrs. Morrison was doing. When we received the documentation from your attorney, including those emails, we held an emergency board meeting. Mrs. Morrison has been removed as board president, effective immediately. The board has also voted to release the lien on your property and to formally retract all claims against you." "That is a start," I said carefully, "but it does not address the damage that has been done. I have spent thousands of dollars on attorney's fees. I have spent hours of my time dealing with this. I have suffered stress and anxiety, and my credit has been affected by having a lien on my property, even if it is now being removed. I understand, Gerald said. The board would like to discuss a settlement with you. We would be willing to reimburse your attorney's fees and provide additional compensation for your trouble. Would you be willing to meet with me and our attorney to discuss terms? I told him I would talk to Marcus and get back to him. Marcus was pleased but cautious when I relayed the conversation. This is a good sign, but we need to be careful, he said. They are scared because they know they are going to lose badly if this goes to trial. We have leverage here. Let us meet with them, but let us go in asking for significant damages. You deserve to be made whole, and frankly, they deserve to pay a price that will make them think twice before doing this to someone else. The settlement meeting was held the following week at a conference room in a law office in Scottsdale. On one side of the table sat Gerald Hoffman, another board member named Patricia Lewis, and their attorney, a woman named Susan Hart, who looked like she would rather be anywhere else. On our side sat Marcus and me. Susan Hart started by acknowledging that the HOA had made serious errors and was willing to make amends. She proposed a settlement of $10,000, which would include removal of the lien, reimbursement of attorney's fees up to $5,000, and a $5,000 payment for pain and suffering. She also offered a written apology from the board. Marcus did not even hesitate. That is not acceptable, he said flatly. Your client did not just make an error. Your former board president engaged in deliberate fraud against my client. She knew he had paid his dues, and she pursued collection action anyway, culminating in filing a false lien. My client has a slam-dunk case for slander of title, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. If this goes to trial, a jury is going to award significant punitive damages. $10,000 is insulting. What are you looking for? Susan asked, her voice tight. $50,000, Marcus said. That includes removal of the lien, full reimbursement of all attorney's fees and costs, compensation for the impact on my client's credit and peace of mind, and punitive damages to send a message that this behavior is unacceptable. Susan and the board members huddled together, speaking in low voices. After a few minutes, Susan turned back to us. We cannot agree to $50,000, she said. The HOA does not have that kind of money in reserves without doing a special assessment on all homeowners, which would be very difficult politically. We can go to $25,000, and that is the absolute maximum. Marcus looked at me, and I gave a small nod. We had discussed beforehand that anything over $20,000 would be acceptable. We will agree to $30,000, Marcus said. That is our bottom line. Take it or we go to trial. There was another huddle, longer this time. Gerald Hoffman looked particularly stressed, his face red and sweaty. Finally, Susan nodded. We will agree to $30,000, she said. But we want a full release of all claims, a confidentiality agreement, and an agreement that your client will not disparage the HOA publicly. No confidentiality agreement, Marcus said immediately. My client has a right to speak truthfully about what happened to him. We will agree to a release of claims related to this specific incident, but he is not going to sign away his right to free speech. And there will be no non-disparagement clause. If people ask him about his experience with the HOA, he is going to tell them the truth. This led to another round of tense negotiations, but eventually, we reached an agreement. The HOA would pay $30,000, $10,000 for attorney's fees and costs, and $20,000 in compensatory and punitive damages. They would immediately release the lien and provide written confirmation that I owed nothing to the HOA. There would be a mutual release of claims, but no confidentiality or non-disparagement agreement. The settlement would be finalized within 30 days. We signed the settlement agreement that afternoon. As Marcus and I walked out of the law office into the bright Arizona sunshine, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I had been carrying for months. "You did good," Marcus said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Not many people would have fought back like you did. Most would have just paid the fake debt to make it go away." "I could not let them get away with it," I said. "Not when I knew I was right." The settlement money was wired to Marcus's trust account 3 weeks later. After his fees and costs were deducted, I received a net payment of just over $19,000. It was not life-changing money, but it felt like justice. More importantly, the lien was removed from my property, and I received a letter from the HOA board confirming that my account was current and that I had never been delinquent. I thought that would be the end of it, but there was one more twist to come. About a month after the settlement was finalized, I was checking my mail when I found a letter from the Maricopa County Attorney's office. My heart sank, wondering what fresh hell this could be, but when I opened it, I was surprised. The letter informed me that the county attorney's office had opened an investigation into potential fraud and forgery related to HOA operations in Desert Bloom Heights. They had been contacted by Robert Palmer, the former treasurer of the HOA board, who had provided evidence of financial irregularities during Brenda Morrison's tenure as president. The letter asked if I would be willing to speak with investigators about my experience. I called the number listed in the letter and was connected with a detective named Lisa Rodriguez. She explained that Robert Palmer had come forward with evidence that Brenda Morrison had been manipulating HOA financial records for years, potentially to embezzle money or to harass homeowners she did not like. "Your case was one of several that caught our attention," Detective Rodriguez said. "We have evidence that she fabricated debts for at least 4 other homeowners in your community, though you are the only one who fought back. We are trying to determine if there was a financial motive or if this was purely harassment." I agreed to meet with Detective Rodriguez and provided her with all the documentation I had, including the emails that Emily had given me. I also told her about Emily and gave her Emily's contact information. Over the next few months, I heard bits and pieces about the investigation through the neighborhood grapevine. It turned out that Brenda Morrison had been using her position as board president to settle personal scores with homeowners she disliked. In addition to me, she had targeted a young couple who had painted their front door a shade of blue she had not approved, an elderly man who had complained about her at a board meeting, and a single mother who had requested a waiver of fees due to financial hardship. In each case, she had fabricated debts, added bogus fees, and threatened liens. The investigation also uncovered that she had been billing personal expenses to the HOA, including landscaping for her own yard and meals at expensive restaurants that she claimed were board meetings, but which no other board members had attended. The total amount of her apparent embezzlement was estimated at over $15,000. In late September, 6 months after my settlement, I was working from home when I heard a commotion outside. I looked out my window and saw 2 police cars parked in front of a house 3 streets over from mine. I did not think much of it until I checked the neighborhood Facebook group that evening and saw that Brenda Morrison had been arrested. According to the posts, she had been charged with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement related to her activities as HOA board president. The charges carried potential prison time if she was convicted. The neighborhood was buzzing with gossip, with dozens of people sharing their own stories of her bullying and vindictive behavior. I felt a sense of satisfaction reading the posts, though it was tempered with a bit of sadness that it had taken so long for someone to stop her. If I had just paid the fake debt like she expected, she would still be terrorizing homeowners and stealing from the HOA. The criminal case moved slowly through the court system. Brenda Morrison initially pleaded not guilty and hired an expensive defense attorney. But as the evidence mounted, including testimony from Emily, Robert Palmer, and me, along with the damning emails and financial records, her attorney apparently advised her to take a plea deal. In March of the following year, almost exactly 1 year after I had received that first threatening letter, Brenda Morrison pleaded guilty to 5 counts of fraud and 2 counts of embezzlement. She was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, 5 years of probation, and was ordered to pay restitution to the HOA and to the homeowners she had defrauded, including an additional $5,000 to me for the costs and stress I had incurred beyond what the civil settlement had covered. I attended the sentencing hearing, sitting in the back of the courtroom. Brenda Morrison looked diminished, her blonde bob now streaked with gray, her expensive pantsuit replaced by a simple dress. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she stood and apologized, though her words sounded hollow and rehearsed. "I let my emotions get the better of me," she said, her voice shaking. "I thought I was protecting the community, but I see now that I was wrong. I am sorry for the pain I caused." The judge was not impressed. "Miss Morrison, you abused a position of trust for personal gain and to settle petty grievances," he said sternly. "You targeted vulnerable members of your community and used the power of your office as a weapon. This court cannot and will not tolerate such behavior. I hope you use your time in custody to reflect on the harm you have caused." As I left the courthouse that day, I ran into Gerald Hoffman, the vice president who had become board president after Brenda was removed. He shook my hand warmly. "Thank you for standing up to her," he said. "If you had not fought back, who knows how long this would have gone on. The board has made a lot of changes since all this came to light. We have hired a professional management company, implemented financial oversight procedures, and adopted a homeowner bill of rights. We are trying to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." "I am glad to hear it," I said. "I just want to live in my house in peace." "You have earned it," Gerald said with a smile. Life in Desert Bloom Heights gradually returned to normal. The new board was professional and responsive. When I had a question about architectural guidelines for a backyard patio I wanted to build, they responded within a week with clear guidance and a straightforward approval process. The neighborhood Facebook group, which had been a source of constant drama under Brenda's reign, became actually useful, with neighbors sharing recommendations and organizing social events. My solar panels continued to generate power without anyone complaining about them. I even had a few neighbors ask me about my experience with the installation, saying they were thinking about getting panels themselves. The irony was not lost on me that the thing that had triggered Brenda's vendetta against me was now becoming popular in the neighborhood. The $5,000 in additional restitution that Brenda was ordered to pay me arrived in 3 installments over the course of her probation. Each check was accompanied by a letter from her probation officer confirming the payment. I deposited them without ceremony and used the money to take a long-delayed vacation to Hawaii. Sitting on a beach in Maui, drinking a cold beer and watching the sunset, I reflected on the entire experience. It had been exhausting, frustrating, and expensive, even with the settlement and restitution. But it had also been important. I had stood up for myself when it would have been easier to just give in. I had refused to be bullied by someone who abused their power. And in doing so, I had helped protect other people from the same treatment. I thought about Emily, who had risked her job to give me the evidence I needed. I thought about Robert Palmer, who had gone to the authorities even though it meant admitting he had gone along with Brenda's schemes for a while. I thought about all the homeowners who had been targeted by Brenda but had been too scared or too tired to fight back. And I felt grateful that I had been in a position to fight, that I had the resources to hire Marcus, and that I had been stubborn enough to see it through. When I got back from Hawaii, I framed the settlement check stub and hung it in my home office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the system works if you are willing to work the system. A reminder that bullies only win when good people do not fight back. And a reminder that even the most frustrating experiences can have a positive outcome if you stay focused and do not give up. The whole ordeal taught me a lot about HOA law, about real estate, about the legal system, and about human nature. I learned that homeowners associations, which are supposed to serve and protect communities, can become vehicles for petty tyrants if there is no oversight. I learned that documentation is everything, that keeping good records can make the difference between winning and losing a legal battle. And I learned that sometimes, when someone threatens you with legal action, the right response is not to back down but to call their bluff and fight back even harder. I also learned about the concept of slander of title, which I had never heard of before all this started. It is a legal claim that protects property owners from false claims against their property. When someone files a lien or makes a false claim that affects your property title, they can be held liable for the damages that causes. In my case, the false lien affected my credit, caused me stress and expense, and could have prevented me from selling or refinancing my home. The law recognizes that property rights are fundamental and that false claims against property should be punished. The $30,000 I won in the settlement was not just compensation for me. It was also a punishment for the HOA. It sent a message that they could not get away with filing false liens and making up debts. The criminal prosecution of Brenda Morrison sent an even stronger message. She did not just lose a civil lawsuit, she went to jail. That is a powerful deterrent for anyone else who might think about abusing their position in an HOA. Looking back now, 2 years after it all started, I can say that I am glad I live in Desert Bloom Heights. The community itself is beautiful, with well-maintained common areas, good amenities, and friendly neighbors. The problems were not with the neighborhood, they were with one person who abused her power. Once she was removed and held accountable, the community improved dramatically. I have even gotten more involved in the HOA myself, attending board meetings and serving on the architectural committee. I figure that the best way to prevent another Brenda Morrison is for good people to participate in governance and to hold leaders accountable. I push for transparency, for clear procedures, and for treating homeowners with respect. Not everyone agrees with all my suggestions, but at least now we have productive debates instead of one person dictating decisions from on high. My experience has also made me something of an accidental advocate for HOA reform. I have spoken at a few community forums about my case, and I have advised several other homeowners who were dealing with similar issues with their HOAs. I always tell them the same things Marcus told me. Document everything, know your rights, and do not be afraid to fight back if you are in the right. One case I helped with involved a woman named Christine Sanders who lived in a different Scottsdale neighborhood. Her HOA was trying to fine her $10,000 because her teenage son had thrown a party that got too loud. The fine was wildly disproportionate to the offense, and when I looked at her HOA's governing documents, I saw that they had not followed their own procedures for imposing fines. I connected her with Marcus, and he was able to get the fine reduced to $500, which was the maximum allowed under the HOA's actual rules. Christine was so grateful that she invited me to speak at her neighborhood's annual meeting about HOA rights and responsibilities. I stood up in front of about 100 homeowners and told my story, emphasizing the importance of knowing your governing documents, keeping good records, and not being intimidated by threats from HOA boards. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people came up to me afterwards to share their own stories of HOA overreach and to ask for advice. It made me realize that my experience, as difficult as it was, had value beyond just my own situation. By sharing what I went through and what I learned, I could help other people avoid the same pitfalls or fight back more effectively if they found themselves in a similar position. That felt good, like something positive had come out of all the stress and frustration. My relationship with my current HOA board is cordial and professional. Gerald Hoffman remained as president for 2 years before stepping down, and he was replaced by a retired accountant named David Morris, who runs the board meetings efficiently and fairly. We have not agreed on everything. I voted against a proposed increase in HOA dues last year, arguing that the board had not adequately justified the need for additional revenue. I lost that vote, but the process was transparent and respectful, and I accepted the outcome. That is what an HOA should be: a democratic organization that serves the community, not a fiefdom for someone to exercise petty power. The difference between the board under Brenda Morrison and the board now is night and day. Under Brenda, information was hoarded, decisions were made behind closed doors, and homeowners were treated with suspicion and hostility. Now, board meetings are well publicized, financial records are available for review, and homeowners are encouraged to participate. The changes go beyond just the board itself. The new management company the HOA hired has been professional and responsive. When I submitted my patio plans, they were reviewed efficiently and approved within 2 weeks. When I had a question about where to put my trash cans on collection day, I got a clear answer the same day I asked. These might seem like small things, but they make a huge difference in quality of life. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had not fought back. If I had just paid the fake debt to make the problem go away, Brenda would have pocketed another win. She would have continued targeting other homeowners, filing false liens, embezzling money, and making people miserable. The criminal investigation would never have happened. She would still be board president today, probably terrorizing some new homeowner over some trivial violation. Instead, she is a convicted felon with a criminal record, and I have $35,000 that I did not have before, counting both the settlement and the restitution. More importantly, I have my peace of mind and my reputation intact. My property title is clean, my credit is fine, and I can sleep at night knowing that I stood up for what was right. The legal system worked in my case, but I am aware that I was lucky in some ways. I had the money to hire a good attorney. I had clear documentation of my payments. I had Emily, who was brave enough to provide me with the smoking gun evidence. And I had a case that was so obviously righteous that the HOA had no choice but to settle. Not everyone in a dispute with their HOA will have all those advantages. That is why I think HOA reform is so important. There need to be stronger protections for homeowners, clearer procedures for resolving disputes, and real consequences for board members who abuse their power. Some states have started enacting laws to address these issues, but there is still a long way to go. In Arizona, the legislature has considered several HOA reform bills in recent years, and I have submitted written testimony in support of some of them. One bill that I particularly supported would have required all HOA board members to undergo training on their legal responsibilities, and would have created a state ombudsman to handle homeowner complaints. Unfortunately, it did not pass, but I am hopeful that similar legislation will be introduced and passed in the future. The more people speak up about their experiences with HOA abuse, the more pressure there will be for reform. My case also highlighted the importance of the slander of title cause of action. Before this happened to me, I had never heard of it, and I suspect most homeowners have not either. But it is a powerful tool for fighting back against false liens and other false claims against property. If more homeowners knew about this legal remedy, I think fewer HOAs would be willing to file questionable liens, knowing that they could face significant financial liability if they are wrong. Marcus told me that since my case, he has handled 3 other slander of title cases against HOAs, and he won or settled all of them favorably. Word is getting out in the legal community that HOAs can be held accountable for filing false liens, and that is a good thing. It creates a deterrent effect and makes HOA boards think twice before taking aggressive collection action without verifying the facts. As for me, I am still living in the same house at 4782 Desert Willow Court in Desert Bloom Heights, Scottsdale, Arizona. My solar panels are still generating power, my patio is finished and looks great, and I am enjoying life in a community that has learned from its mistakes. I have no plans to move, and I am actually happy with my HOA now, which is something I never thought I would say after everything that happened. The experience changed me in some ways. I am more cautious now about trusting authority figures, more diligent about keeping records, and more willing to stand up for myself when I know I am right. But I also have more faith in the legal system and in the basic decency of most people. For every Brenda Morrison who abuses power, there are people like Emily and Robert Palmer who are willing to do the right thing, even at personal cost. And there are people like Marcus Chen, my attorney, who was professional, effective, and genuinely cared about getting me justice. And people like Gerald Hoffman, who stepped up to clean up the mess Brenda left behind and to lead the HOA in a better direction. And people like Detective Rodriguez, who took the case seriously and did the work to hold Brenda criminally accountable. In the end, my story is not just about me winning $30,000 from my HOA. It is about standing up to a bully, exposing wrongdoing, and making my community better. It is about the importance of documentation, the power of the legal system when used properly, and the value of persistence. It is about how one person fighting back can create ripples that lead to real change. If you are reading this and you are dealing with an HOA dispute, my advice is simple. Know your rights, document everything, and do not be afraid to seek legal help if you need it. HOA boards have power, but they do not have unlimited power, and they can be held accountable when they abuse it. You do not have to just accept whatever they say. If you know you are right, fight back. The system is not perfect, but it can work if you are willing to use it. And to anyone serving on an HOA board, remember that you are there to serve the community, not to rule it. Treat homeowners with respect, follow your governing documents, and when in doubt, err on the side of fairness and transparency. The power you have is a responsibility, not a weapon. Use it wisely, or you might end up like Brenda Morrison, stripped of your position, financially ruined and behind bars. As for Brenda herself, I have not seen her since the sentencing hearing. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she sold her house and moved away after completing her jail sentence. I do not know where she is now, and I do not particularly care. She is no longer my problem, and more importantly, she is no longer anyone else's problem either. The whole experience, from that first threatening letter to the final restitution check, took about 2 years from start to finish. 2 years of stress, anger, legal meetings, court appearances, and uncertainty. But in the end, justice was served, I was made whole, and my community is better off. That makes it all worthwhile. I still have the framed check stub in my office, and I still look at it sometimes when I need a reminder that fighting for what is right matters. $30,000, minus attorney fees and costs, deposited to my account as a result of a lawsuit I filed against my HOA for slander of title. It represents vindication, justice, and the power of one person to stand up against institutional bullying. Would I go through it all again? Honestly, I hope I never have to. But if I found myself in a similar situation, would I fight back just as hard? Absolutely. Because some things are worth fighting for, and justice is one of them.